In chapter 2 of Getting to Yes, the authors talk about how we approach the people that we are negotiating with. And in this case, you can think about almost any situation of negotiations. The bottom line is that we talk to other people. We're not talking to robots or computers, but we talk to other people. And the same way that we have our own ideas, interests, perceptions, and emotions, the people on the other side, people that we negotiate with, have the exact same things. And it's very important to try and think about that human to human interaction and what does it do to the setup of the negotiation from the beginning, from the first time we meet, until the very end. One main advice the book is giving us is this idea that we should separate the people from the position and separate the people from the problem. The quote here says, participants should come to see themselves as working side by side, attacking the problem, and not each other. So many times we tend to focus on the person that's on the other side and to make the problem personal. We are at some point stopping to think about the problem itself and how do we best address it and solve it, but instead we try to fight with the person or the people on the other side, and we are focusing on being victorious, on winning. Now, that's not efficient in a number of ways. First of all, we're not focusing on the problem that we're really trying to solve. But second of all, and especially in international relations or relations, longer-term relations between countries or between countries and other entities, there's something else there. We need to continue and think about the day after. So after we address this specific problem, what happens next? In many of those cases, we still want to have relations the following day, or maybe we'll come back to negotiate another trade deal next year. Or maybe it is a country that we will need its help or would need to again address another problem with it down the line in 10 years. And so if we are now successful in focusing on the problem and solving it, that would maintain or even build the relationships long term. If we are focusing only on the people, we may be victorious right now, but we might lose a lot in the longer term. When we are approaching any problem that we are negotiating on, a lot of time we tend to focus on the objective problem. You know, in the car salesman example, we tend to look at the car or look at our bank account and search for objective items there. How old is the car? How many mileage is on it? Is the engine making funny noises or not? Or if we have a disagreement about the price, there's only a limit of amount of dollars that I will be able to pay based on what I have in my bank account. And that's good and that's important. But we have to remember that those objectives are related to how we see them and how the other side sees them, which brings about this idea of perception. And the fact that the way that I see the situation is most likely not how the other side sees the situation. I think the book goes through this table that compares a tenant and a landlord, and they look on the same things, but from their own point of view. And you can see how the same situation can be seen very differently, or at least different enough so there is no clear answer if we end up negotiating on any of those items. So one very good way we can try and advance negotiations is to try and stand in their shoes, to understand their point of view. So if I'm asking a leader of another country to make territorial concessions, to give up on land, that's fine, and from my point of view, and I may have very good objective reasons why I demand that, but I need to put myself in their shoes and see what would it take for them to say, okay, you can have this piece of land. Now, another nice kind of tactic is to be open about it, is to come up and say, I understand that from your point of view, and to try and make the argument from their point of view, showing that you are trying to understand their perceptions and not just the objectives of the case. We should always try to avoid blaming, because blaming again takes it away from focusing on the problem to focusing on the people. So try to stay away from blaming the other side, but instead attacking and focusing on the problem. And if you can identify that the other side has some very clear perception about you and how you behave, if you can do something to just break it, right? If I have the perception that the other side is really, we always use hard bargaining, if they will be the first one to give a concession or suggest a concession, even a very small one, that would kind of rattle my perception about them and maybe open up my mind to hear what they have to say a little bit more. So if you can identify what is the perception of the other side and do something to change that perception, or at least to shake the belief in how you behave, that can go a very, very long way. And then we want to make sure that we're keeping both sides involved. Don't dictate terms, talk about terms, bring them in, ask them what are they thinking. Okay, remember that there are also people with perceptions and ideas that you're talking to. And think about this idea of face saving. When we ask another side to make a concession, that's great, but we have to understand that they may have their own level 2, their own constituents that they have to then come clean with, or that they have to make sure to save face with. And so again, try to address that, try to talk about that, or create opportunities that don't necessarily collide with the values of the other side. We need to know that people are emotional. And as professional, even diplomats, at the end of the day, people are emotional. And the best way to deal with emotions is to acknowledge that they're there, to say, I can see that you're angry, to vent yourself, whatever it is. If somebody is frustrating you, tell them, this is really frustrating to interact with you. Why? Maybe we can take a break and come back, right? So vent things out, acknowledge their emotions, and use some symbolic gestures. When somebody is telling you that you are frustrating them, a simple apology could go a long way, even if it doesn't change anything in the negotiation itself. Just those symbolic gestures can be useful. Now, we cannot have negotiations if we are not communicating with each other, right? And so we have to make sure that the communication channels are open and that we hear what the other side has to say and that they listen to what we have to say. active listening, listen intently. We teach kids full body listening. Make sure that you look like you are listening to them. That's important. And then when you are reacting, if you can repeat some of the stuff that they were saying or directly address it, that means that you were listening, right? And then make sure that the other side understands you. Try to make them repeat some of the stuff that you're saying and hear how they say it. Are we back in that mode of perception of you saying one thing but they're hearing another thing? Try to see that the communication is at a level where you can understand each other. And for that matter, we need to speak with purpose. So, don't make statements that will complicate the situation. Don't try to make statements that will make you look good, but try to make statements or offers or proposals that address the problems and try to move the negotiations or the problem-solving part forward. So overall, this chapter and this point is going back to the first item right over here. Separate the people from the position and try to work with them at solving the problem and not competing them against them in who is going to be victorious at the end of the day.